politicians want to give you free money to buy a home.
My administration,
our government can provide up to $50,000,
$15,000,
£12,000,
$25,000 on a new home.
But does it actually work?
There are basically two schools of thought. One is that if you give people more money to buy a home, obviously they now have more money to buy a house, so housing becomes more affordable. The other says that when you give people more money to buy a home, they're now able to spend more money on a home, and so home prices increase by exactly that much, and housing is no more affordable. All the additional money just ends up in the pockets of home sellers. So who's right? Well, it turns out who's right depends on just one data point. To explain, let's take a look at this brilliant British housing study. I don't know if I can do that British accent. In 2013, the UK government introduced a policy called Help to Buy.
Under the scheme, the government will boost your savings by 25%.
This was a program that gave people interest-free loans to help them buy homes. It was pretty close to just giving people free money to buy houses. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Researchers looked at what happened to home prices across different parts of England after the policy was introduced. And what they found was fascinating. In places like London, where it's really hard to build new homes because of strict zoning laws and planning permissions, prices shot up. The extra government money got absorbed into higher home prices almost immediately. But outside of London, in places where it's easier to build, prices barely moved. Builders saw the increased demand, started putting up new houses, and the market more or less kept up. Same country, same policy, but different local restrictions on home building. And the results? Well, the first school of thought, the one that says giving people money just pushes up prices, is true if you can't build more housing. And the second school, the one that says giving people money helps people afford housing, is true if you can build more housing. Similar studies around the world have shown the exact same thing. What this teaches us is that you can't just solve the problem by just throwing money at it. You have to first solve the structural reasons why housing is unaffordable, and that reason is because we've choked off the ability to build more housing in most of our cities. If you want to make housing affordable, just giving people cash isn't gonna cut it. But here's where it gets weird. It doesn't even have to be a housing subsidy for housing costs to go up. Anytime people get more money from any source, housing tends to swallow it up, whether it's free childcare, food stamps, earned income tax credits, or even higher wages. When housing is scarce, much of that extra cash just disappears into higher rent. And it can be kind of easy to miss, but it's actually a really big deal. This phenomenon isn't new. Winston Churchill actually gave us a really good example of it over a century ago. In the 1800s, it cost a penny a day to cross the Waterloo Bridge. This was something that many working class Londoners from the south side of the river had to pay to get to work. But in 1878, the British government lifted that toll. The move was meant to help low-income workers by easing their commute costs. So what actually happened? Rents on the south side of the river, where the workers lived, went up by 6 pence a week. Why? Because of the lowered commute costs, these apartments were now more attractive and tenants had more money to spare, so they outbid each other and the rent went up. The benefit that was intended for the workers got almost entirely absorbed by rent. And this is still happening today. Not because landlords suddenly became greedier, but because this is how markets work when supply can't respond to demand. And housing is uniquely positioned to behave this way because it has what economists call inelastic demand. You can skip out on your daily Starbucks coffee, but you can't skip out on paying rent. You can unsubscribe from Netflix, but you can't unsubscribe from having a place to sleep at night. In a normal market, when people want more of something, businesses make more of it. Demand goes up, supply follows, prices stay level. That's how it works with toasters or with sneakers or with a carton of eggs. Eventually. But housing doesn't work like that because in a lot of places, it's just not legal to build more. Zoning rules, permit delays, local opposition, they all choke off new construction. So when people have more money to spend and there aren't more homes to buy or rent, there's just more money chasing the same number of homes. And that means prices go up. Even well-intentioned programs like free childcare, tax credits, and income supplements ultimately get sucked up by landlords when housing supply is locked down. That's why housing is one of the most important issues to solve. It's this issue that distorts the impact of every other policy. If we don't make it legal and feasible to build more homes, every attempt to help people financially will just end up fueling higher rent instead of a higher quality of life. Okay, so now you might be wondering, won't building more housing just lead to yet another luxury apartment that no one can afford? And to that I say, you might be surprised. I get into the details in this video up here.